Peace. What's good, YouTube? It's Kareem Samadi back again with another video. So today we're going to get into the dark side of consciousness, the dark side of spirituality, or spiritual awakening. All right. So what do I mean by dark side? Because to assume that the dark side is something that's going to be bad, something that's going to be evil, it's not necessarily the case. This is just a part of the journey. There's always going to be a darker path on that journey that we all need to face within ourselves. So learning that everything that you've been taught is a lie is a shock that some people never recover from. And is also a shock that some people have so much cognitive dissonance around that they will never accept it. Not in this lifetime, at least. And the reason why I say that is because it's happened to me. Right. It's happened to not just me, but many others as well, especially during now 2023, when consciousness I would observe is at an all time high for many people, especially for people who have been around for a long time, the ancient ones. So what we really got to understand is that when they say that it's a matrix, it truly really is in a lot of different ways, because when you come into this world, you come in very innocent, you come in as a blank slate, and you have very little inclination of how to function here, of what's going on here, of what is right, what is wrong, all these different things. Everything that you are is a culmination of what other people told you, and what other people have showed you is the way, right? You have been crafted by everything around you, by your environment. And that, when you discover the truth of that and you wonder who you really are underneath all of that, that is when the shock begins to set in, because you realize that who you are, the first question that you ask is, who am I? You realize that who you are is something that you've been out of touch with for years. And you might think that who you are is something that you would have known, right? But there's still parts of you that you don't understand yet. That subconscious part of you, the unconscious part of you, that you don't understand yet. A lot of people like to say that they know themselves, but when it comes to the spiritual aspect, many people are blind to that part of themselves. And some people are meant to be blind to it. It's okay. We're all on different paths. We're all on different parts of this journey. Doesn't matter. There's no you being ahead of anyone else. It's just all dependent on where you're at in your consciousness and what you're supposed to be doing at this particular time. So when you do discover that a lot of this stuff is a lie, and that your personal truth is what colors your reality, and what has been coloring your reality are the programs that have been put into you, that's when things begin to really shake up. And this can lead to a lot of different things. And this dark side, which is only one element of the dark side, we'll get into the other dark side later, but this dark side that you're first introduced to, which is the shock, is something that people may not necessarily recover from, because it can lead to a long bout of apathy, of depression, because you start to realize that most of the smokes and mirrors that's going on a day-to-day basis, politics, a lot of the debate that people have, you start to really look at things from a different point of view, and you start to see them for what they are, which is just meaningless things that almost feel distracting, right? You start to look at humanity, you become more apathetic towards humanity in many different ways, because in essence, humanity is like a child that just doesn't know any better, right? But the higher aspects of ourselves does. And that's what keeps us in line. That's what keeps us having that foundation. But humanity is nothing more than a filter for us to express ourselves. And so when you discover these things, it can lead to a long bout of depression. Because I was depressed for a little while too, because when you're searching for the truth, it's it really isn't the easiest thing to digest. And I'm pretty sure there's a verse in the Bible that talks about stuff like that, where it says that where, seek the truth, and when you find the truth, you'll be astonished, but rejoice because you'll know that the kingdom of God is at hand. And that's telling you is that, sometimes the truth really is going to be ugly. Sometimes the truth is going to be hard to digest. And it's going to be disturbing, but usually what you've been told, things that are comforting or things that are just, that make you feel more fearful, right? But a lot of things that you've been looking outside of yourself to find comfort from have been lies. A lot of lies are very comforting. And when we really look at things from an objective point of view, for all of what consciousness really entails, right, we can really see things for what they are. And a lot of this stuff you have to really dive deep for. There's things that I can't just explain, because there's certain things that people have to come to conclusions for themselves, right? And this is where you can find a lot of the apathy. This is where you can find a lot of the depression. You'll have depression because there will be things that you want to explain to people, right, about spirituality, that you have to explain to people who speak that same language as you. And it's kind of difficult. And with people who don't get it, right? People, and I'm not saying people who don't get it are in the matrix, right? We're going to talk in different terms, right? Those people are just at a different level to where they're not going to understand things the way that you understand things. But when you find yourself alone like that, it can make you feel depressed, and it can make you feel apathetic in life. You start to realize that a lot of things that you're doing or were doing were meaningless. You'll start to see things as meaningless until you really discover what synchronicity is, which shows you that there's meaning in all things that happen to you, meaning in things and all things that you do in life, lessons everywhere. So nothing you really do is meaningless. And that's really how you'll get out of the apathy and the depression phase. That's how I got out of the apathy and depression phase too. And a lot of grief can occur because, let's say you're coming out of a religious system, right? And that's all you've known throughout your life. And now you're getting into consciousness. You're getting into, your own personal form of enlightenment, studying the occult, whatever the case may be. There's a lot of grief around that, because when you step out of a religion, especially like, a religion with large communities, right? You're leaving your support system. You're leaving what you perceived as before. It was serving that role of camaraderie, it was serving that role of brotherhood, sisterhood, community, family, all those things. Religion can provide all those things, guaranteed, right? And so you'll find yourself grieving over those things. You'll find yourself grieving over the fact that you've been tricked, you've been lied to, you've been told to think a certain way, and now you're actively trying to undo things that have been programmed into you, trying to undo things that program the way that you've acted in your life, program the way that you speak in your life, program the way that you walk and talk in your life, what you do in your life, how you see things, right? And in all, programming your reality. There's a lot of grief surrounding those things, because it can be hard to let go. It can be hard to understand that you'll never really see things the same way, because like they say in the Matrix, once you take the red pill, it's really, really hard. No, not even hard. It's impossible to really go back to sleep after seeing that. You have to really want to, but even then it will never be the same. And it's very appalling, because for me, I was grieving too. And you can find yourself feeling lost. But you have to realize that the only reason why you're lost is because a lot of times you're still functioning off of that program, that truth, that guidance is something you're going to find with these two eyes, right? Something that you're going to see with these two eyes or hear with your ears, something that you're going to be able to feel. You're going to find that truth, that guiding light, or that salvation. But on the contrary, right, you'll have to really look within, and nothing's really going to be able to give that to you but you. And there's a lot of evidence to back this up, because not only in every major every major faith, or every major spiritual system, right? They always say, and many gurus, many spiritual leaders throughout history have always said to look within yourself in some way, shape, or form. Jesus Christ even said that the kingdom of God is within you, right? And that you are in him and he is in you. So when you understand these things, you start to realize that everything out here, it's okay to to do what you need to do out here to be comfortable, to get along, like that's what we have to do to function here. And learn the lessons, take them with forth therefore. You don't have to be so serious about everything, but when you're looking for the truth, when you're looking for the answers, when you're looking for the transformation, the only place you're going to find all that is in you. Everything out here is meant to be a reference to turn back within you and find that truth again, right? That's what all these books are for. That's what many of these teachers who are helping you, to help yourself, right? That's what many of these teachers, myself included, are pointing you towards looking back within. Because as from what we can observe right now, everything is changing. And I know you notice it because I've noticed it too, in many ways, more than one. And I got visions of this in many dreams in 2022, right? It's not going to be the same. Spiritually, it's not going to be the same. And that's okay because everything's supposed to change anyway. That's the nature of the universe, ever changing, ever transforming, right? But everything really is going to be different from here on forward. And that's a great thing because for us, that means that, even more so, that power that we find within, that self-empowerment that we develop within is something that we need to focus on even more because that's going to be what gets us through the ever-changing times. And that's going to be our rock. Once we build a foundation in our spiritual power, nothing can really phase us. Nothing can really stop us, and really nothing is going to change our reality. We're in control of our reality. We're in control of our timeline, right? But alternatively, if we don't self-empower ourselves, our grief will break us down, and so we have to be cognizant of that. It's okay to feel these things, so it's perfectly okay, but we have to develop the courage to be able to move forward. And, when it comes to a lot of what's going on, like we'll be detaching from things, from human things that we know have been holding us back from our spirituality. But sometimes we might take this into excess and we might keep detaching. You might not see the point in participating in so many things out here. And there's a lot of people that, I've seen in spiritual communities, they just don't see a point in working anymore. They don't see a point in making friends anymore, or even being around people who aren't conscious, right? But I beg to differ, right? Because a lot of these things, they matter. You're still in the physical plane for a reason. So let's not get it twisted here. Let's not buy into the new age, deception, right? Which is to kind of keep you in a spiritual psychosis. Okay. We have to understand that functioning here requires certain things, and that's okay. You have to do what you got to do to take care of business on a basic human level, right? We shouldn't have chakra issues, root chakra issues, where we're worried about our survival, our shelter, our food, whatever the case may be. Do what you need to do to get by, but don't detach so much to where you don't care about those things. That's how you'll put too much energy in the higher chakras because you're focused on spiritual things, but neglect the physical body, neglect the matter body, right? Everything we do has to be in balance. And so our higher selves is really going to show us what exactly we have to do. But we also have to use our common sense here too. And not being around conscious people, is okay. We have to, there's nothing saying that we can't mesh in with people who aren't the same as us. Because from what I've learned, I've been around people who are so much more different than me, right? And I really feel like I learned from people who aren't the same as me, because it seems like there's always some kind of lesson. Even if those people are completely different from me, I learned something from them. And there's something to gain, whether it's a friendship, whether it's a lesson, even if it's people that we may not even like each other, I still figure out ways to benefit from that. Right. And not everything has to be hyper spiritual, right? Sometimes we can get so far attached to the spirituality aspect of ourselves that we'll forget that sometimes, or not even sometimes, like we'll forget how to actually function as a human being. Where every conversation we have to have has to be something spiritual, right? Instead of just having normal conversations with people, sometimes you see this a lot in a lot of what people have called like hoteps or whatever. People have taken the spiritual systems too far, and to a point where it becomes a whole fantasy and a whole agenda, right, against ourselves. You don't want to take things too far. You want to be balanced with everything. Not everything has to be so serious, and so not everything has to be you inserting spirituality into it. Spirituality is really something that you are. It's in your nature to be that way. Who you are as a person, as a man, as a woman, that's what you define yourself. That's how you'll present yourself in human interaction, right? It's okay to be who you are. You don't have to try to be anything else. You don't have to put on an act. You don't have to put on a facade. You don't have to wear a mask to be spiritual. But it's also one of the stages that are part of this dark side, right? Where you're finding your identity again. And so you think that your identity is in what you're learning, or it's in, the jewelry, it's in, how you act with those books telling you how to act, right? Rather than finding the authenticity within you, or you think it's about what you do. It's about how much vegetables you eat. It's not really about that. It's really about who are you within, without all the outer stuff, right? When all this stuff fades away, when none of this stuff matters anymore, who are you still then? That's the question that we have to ask. So we can't detach from everything physical and then attach to everything spiritual. We have to have a balance, because the physical body is still the lowest form of our higher selves, right? So we have to understand that if you look at the 5 koshas in Hinduism or Tantra, right? 5 koshas, the lowest body is the physical body. So it's still a part of the self. And so that's why we should never really neglect it. We shouldn't detach entirely, because it's something that we still have to transform over time. It'll always be a part of us. Physical body will always be a part of us. But it's the attachment to one over the other that can really cause issues for us in the long run, right? And so another thing I want to get into is nihilism, right? Because you'll start to really think that a lot of the stuff that occurs, everything in this world, nothing you do matters, right? Nihilism also ties in with apathy. You won't see any meaning there. Everything that you see will feel like it's nothing. There's no real meaning. No real meaning to morality, no real meaning to ethics, no real meaning to any of the stuff, to love, all that stuff. It can be very easy to fall into nihilism, right? And even more so, but the meaning is really what you give it, from what I've discovered, right? There's been times where I did feel nihilistic about, after my spiritual awakening, at least, there's been times where I did feel nihilistic, and it's okay, right? But I had to really discover, why am I feeling like there's no meaning? What in me is causing me to feel this way? And where's the meaning that I'm searching for within myself, right? That I haven't found yet? And why am I projecting the meaning of nihilism, right? Why am I projecting nothingness onto the world that I'm looking at, rather than discovering that there's a part of me that feels like there's nothingness inside? Why am I projecting that outside instead of trying to focus on the problem that's within? Or not even the problem, but the lesson. And that's another thing, because you start to look at everything as a problem instead of seeing all your problems as lessons, right? Instead of, because problem sometimes has a negative connotation associated with it. But when you look at everything that you do as a lesson, everything automatically changes, right? You look at your mistakes as a lesson. You look at your failures as a lesson. Everything negative, if you just transform it and you re-identify it with a lesson, and you say, well, I went through this because, or, well, this happened because, and I became this way after that, or all of this was a part of me to get me to where I am now. You start to look at that instead of lamenting over your past so much, right? It makes a lot of things pay off for you in the future. It transforms you, because what you're doing is you're taking yourself from being a victim, what you've been programmed to look at yourself as and to identify as, and to heavily victimize yourself and overall, to make yourself feel small, right? You've been programmed to look at that, and instead of looking at it like that, now you're looking at yourself as an ever transforming being, no matter what happens, right? And there's going to be a lot of confusions, and with all the spiritual knowledge that we're coming into, you're going to see, well, there's a lot of contradictions here. Why isn't everything adding up? Or why isn't everything consistent? Because, you've been programmed to think that everything has to be a logical, consistent, intellectual conclusion. That there has to be a might is right type of thing. Whereas that's not the case. It's not even the case in the physical world. Two people can look at the same thing and will not see the same thing. Two people can get into a car accident and think that two different events happened, right? There's no real general consensus on things, but we've been trained to see things that way. This is why things like news outlets exist, to keep people on one page of what reality what reality is supposed to look like, right? This is why news outlets exist. And of course, there's a lot of programming pushed through those news outlets in order to keep you in a low vibrational mindset. So when you start taking control back of your mind, the less you'll have to look at the news. The less you'll have to look at TV. The less you'll have to look at your phone for all your answers for what's going on, what reality is, right? And confusion, it's going to happen because it's a confusing path. It's a path that you're not prepared for, you can't Google the answers for your spiritual path. You can't Google the answers for life after death, right? That's something you have to experience. That's something you have to research for yourself. When you get into astral traveling, it's something that you have to understand for yourself, remember for yourself, right? And the adjustment period is going to be rough, right? It was rough for me, and some people don't always adjust properly. And they feel like it's easier to go back to old systems that felt more comfortable, that didn't have as much questioning, because there's always going to be endless questioning. And the reason why there's endless questions is because there's endless answers. If you could just reach a certain point in knowledge and be like, okay, I know everything, then knowledge wouldn't really be what it is. Knowledge is something that's infinite, right? And it's a quality of the gods. And so to identify with knowledge, to be knowledge itself, is much more powerful than saying that you know everything. So sometimes people will go back to old systems that felt more comfortable, like religions, politics, whatever the case may be. They'll go back to these things that felt more comfortable because it might not be time for them to awaken yet. And that's perfectly okay. Nothing's wrong with religious beliefs, in my opinion. And because they all have spiritual significance. All religions have spawned from spiritual systems. They spawn from different spiritual practices. I know the origins of all major religions, right? And if you don't know the origins of them, take it upon yourself to learn about it, right? Read, if you want to learn about Christianity, read the historical origins of Christianity. Read Christianity before Christ. If you want to know about Islam, read the historical origins of Islam, and check out the references that Walter Williams puts in the back, and do your own research. A lot of these things, there's going to be endless questions, right? But if you do want to come out of religions, right, and start to only think based off of what you know, then it's going to take research. It's going to take questioning. And from what I've observed, though, even though, and that's not to say like religions are right or wrong. I'm not looking at things that are right and wrong. I'm looking at the spiritual significance that these things have. And from what I've seen is that they are all different pieces of the puzzle meant to be put together. I've grown past seeing religion as something that's lesser on a spiritual path, because I understand that some people choose to be religious before they incarnate. They choose to be born into religious families, right? They choose to go through religion in their lifetime, right? For me, I went from being a Christian, growing up Christian, then I went to being agnostic, then I went to being an atheist, then I became a Muslim, and then after I was a Muslim, I went back to, I got into spirituality, and actually throughout most of this time, I was always looking into spirituality too. But when I really got into the spiritual side of things, and into the occult side of things, that's when I really started to find my groove. But I noticed that I had to go through all those religions, and because I was always a person who questioned things, I was always a person who really read the material, who did heavy research on spiritual things because it was just always interesting to me. And that much learning that I did at young ages, right, helped me bring me to where I am right now, so that I can make informed decisions on my own, to get into religions and then to leave religions and then to understand everything else afterwards, right? And so some people may have to live entire lives, in one piece of the puzzle, in one religion, to learn many different lessons and go on many different journeys, while some people might do everything all in one lifetime. They might put all those puzzle pieces together all in one lifetime, but go on less journeys and learn less lessons, or maybe even more lessons, right? We are all in different stages of our consciousness, so it's really nothing crazy. And actually, you can still do spiritual work while being religious too. You just have to find the most spiritual side of your religion, which is, it already is inherently spiritual. So at the end of the day, you're still not, you don't have to change anything. You don't have to become anything. Do things the way that you see fit. Find the most spiritual side of it and work with it, right? It's supposed to be a flexible thing. It only becomes rigid. It only becomes dogmatic when we make it that way, right? But we always have a choice. We don't have to be like the people of the past, enforcing ideas onto other people. We're past that, right? And going through the dark side of spirituality, you grow out of that might is right mindset. You grow out of that dominant, dogmatic mindset to where you have to make sure that other people agree with you. And the reason why is because your ego is looking for answers, right? Your ego is looking for something consistent, and your ego is never sure because your ego never really knows, but the inside of you always knows, right? So when you find yourself projecting that other people need to be on the same page as you, it's because there's uncertainty within you. There's doubt within you. A lot of the most a lot of big religious figures are not really religious. They know a lot of things about that religion, yet they still tell lies to people, right? And they don't even have to be big. You know what I mean? And there's a lot of people that are heavily religious, and they go and they preach every single day, but they have the most doubts. Whereas people who don't take it as seriously has less doubts, and they might be more accepting of others, but they don't really enforce anything on other people. They live their lives the way that they want to live their lives, and that's perfectly fine. That's how we should all be, accepting of each other. That's how things were, back then, before we got into a dark age. We understood each other because as different tribes on the planet, right, we understood that, hey, if I go to this side of the planet, it's still going to be the same thing, but it's practiced a different way. When you start to discover spiritual syncretism in spiritual systems and religions, right, and you start to see why or how everything correlates, you start to see that, hey, in pretty much every spiritual system, there's always some kind of messiah figure. There's always some kind of mother figure. And you start to put two and two together and realize that it doesn't matter where you go, it's all the same. This is exactly why the people who were taken, and I think it was what's it called, the voodoo people, they mixed in the saints with the orishas in their spiritual system, and voodoo and hoodoo. That's what the Haitians did during a slavery. So, and the reason why they did that is so that they can create a new type of energy, still be able to practice their religions, while their slave masters were trying to enforce Christianity on them. All they did was syncretize it and make the energy their own. So this is just something we have to all learn, and it's something that you're gonna learn why you come into the knowledge. But in the dark side, sometimes you're gonna go through that phase of pride, and it's okay to go through that phase of pride as long as you can move past that phase of pride, right? You're moving through all of your lower emotions while you're finding yourself again. As long as you have the courage to move past all of it and you discover your own humility, that's when you'll keep moving forward, right? And adjusting and coming into your power is the hardest part for some people. As naturally you want to blame something outside of you. You want to seek something outside of you. Or, if we feel powerless, we want to blame other things outside of us for making us feel powerless. If you don't know the answers, you want to try to find those answers outside of you. But you're adjusting to finding answers inside of you. You're doing things completely differently than you've been doing them for who knows how long in your lives, right? Discernment after awakening is very huge. And it's easy it's here when you're learning your discernment, coming into consciousness, right? It's easy to get caught up in cults. It's easy to get caught up, listen to people who lie online and abuse the vulnerability of others who are just reawakening. And I say reawakening because we're all really conscious at the end of the day. It's just at different levels, right? But people who are just coming into consciousness, it's very easy to abuse the vulnerability of people feeling that way. I can see a lot of it online, right? And this is exactly why I and many other people say, just go within. There's going to come a point in time where YouTube isn't going to be available, right? There's going to come a point in time where all the spiritual information online, it just isn't going to be there anymore, or it's not going to be up to date anymore. So it's important to find a nice foundation within yourself, because when you die, where's the computer going to be then, right? You have to build that foundation within yourself first, and then that way you can really move forward, right? Because the computer is only going to be of so much help when you die. Those books are only going to be of so much help when you die. At the end of the day, it comes down to you and your mind and how much control you really have within it. The shift from looking outside to going within is a big shift. And it's also the most rewarding one too, because it has the most payoff. When you look within yourself and you find that power within yourself, you develop self-empowerment. There you get the largest payoff from that, because now you don't have to rely on anything, because you have the power. You don't have to rely on anything outside of you. You have the power and you have assurance on how to use that power, on how to use the power of your mind. And you don't have to look for it outside of you. So, developing that discernment of others is very key. You don't want to get caught up paying thousands of dollars for spiritual information you could have found yourself, right? Paying thousands of dollars for somebody's course. I mean, it's just not valuable at that point. But let's say they do have something to offer, and they're actually giving you something real to offer. Your higher self will let you know whether it's okay to go forward with that or not. But when you have to develop that connection with your higher self, you have to develop that connection with your inner self, so that you can develop the discernment, right? The discernment is very key. So, and just a way that you can really pick out people who are bullshitting you is, if they just keep telling you, listen to me, do this and that, I have the one truth, it's obvious. And a lot of times they're going to mix truth with lies too. So you have to be aware of that. But in general, it'll be very easy to pick out, if they're charging you $2,000 just to learn basic spiritual information, or, everything about them is just, monetized. You have to take into question some of those things. If they don't really hold up their end of the bargain, or if they tell you to rely on them, that's something else you gotta also ask. Why are they asking me to do that? So develop good spiritual foundation within yourself, good spiritual discernment, because that's going to be key moving forward. Moving forward, everything outside of you is not going to be able to do it for you. You can only find it within. I can only say that so many different times, but when you get it, you won't need to watch YouTube videos anymore. Guarantee you that. When you get it, you'll need the lectures a lot less. When you get it, you'll need the books a lot less. The books will only add to you finding what's really in you. I'm not saying books are useless, because I read a lot of spiritual books, right? They're very helpful for me learning about a lot of different things. Like I said, I recommend so many different ones, and we'll get into many different ones in the future, should I see it fit. But what I will say is that, relying on books the same way that if you're religious and you're relying on one book, right? But knowing one book and relying on that one book can block you off from higher spiritual knowledge. It can because you can begin to use it as a crutch and become short-sighted. So you want to put everything together. Different fragments of your mind are out there, and they're sprinkled in these books. So what you want to focus on is bringing all those fragments into you. And so that's really all I gotta say about the dark side. I mean, the true dark side, because this is about the awakening process mostly, but the true dark side is that journey that you take within. When you turn away from everything that you've been taught, that journey that you take within, that left-hand path, that's the true dark side. That dark side of the tree, of the Kabbalah, the other tree, the tree with the forbidden fruit, that's the real dark side, right? Where everything you do, you're marching to the beat of your own drum. So, and you're creating that new part of yourself, and so those are beyond the awakening process. But at the same time, the more that you come into knowledge of yourself, you're going to start to see what I'm talking about. And so that's really all I got to say about the dark side, right now at least. So if you enjoy the content, leave a like and a comment, and I hope you all benefited from this video. I wish you all luck in your journey, and peace.